Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to Introduction to Web Security Threats webinar. My name is Bobby Claudio, and I will be your moderator for this session. Let me just remind you that this session will be recorded. And before we start our fun and learning, let's have a quick check-in. Could you please say hi and shout out what organization you're coming from in the chat box? Just click on the chat button below your screen, and please make sure to send it to everyone and not just to the panelists. Okay, let me just open my chat box. Okay, so we have people from Antipolo. Thank you for joining us. People from Quezon City, from Cavite, from Bicol, from Baguio, people from Pasig and from Parañaque. A lot of people are joining this afternoon from Taytay and Santa Mesa. Thank you very much for joining us, and it looks like a very good turnout. Now, before we proceed, let us first introduce our company. So, who is Trend Micro? Trend Micro is a cybersecurity company that's been around for more than 30 plus years, leading the market with continuous innovations in virtualization, cloud, artificial intelligence, and IoT. Trend Micro has customers across the top Fortune 500, including 8 of the top 10 global Fortune 500. We are made up out of 6,700 plus trenders who are passionate about making the world a safer and better place for everyone. And now, for some reminders for our webinar. So here are the tools you can use to communicate with us. You'll see both the chat and the Q&A buttons at the bottom of your screen. Please use the chat section if you need to send us any feedback during the webinar. And the Q&A section is where you send in your questions. I would like to repeat, the Q&A section is where you send in your questions. You can post them at any time throughout the webinar, and in order to manage our limited time, they will be answered at the end. Basic questions will be answered via chat, and the others will be answered live during the Q&A. We'll also use the upvote features of Zoom. If you have the same question, just click on the like button, and the questions with the most number of likes will be prioritized during the Q&A portion. Our speaker will be joined by other subject matter experts who will help respond to our questions. You may also add more details to the question by using the comment button. A polling question will be posted from time to time, and a separate window will pop up to show the poll. Select your answer from the list and then click Submit. The results of the poll will be shown after. Just click Close when you're done viewing the results. At the end of the webinar, you will automatically be routed to a survey form. Kindly take time to answer this short survey. Your feedback is valuable to us and will help us improve our succeeding webinars. Those who answered the survey will receive a certificate of attendance for this webinar via email 1 week after the session. So again, just to repeat, if you answer the survey, that is when you will receive a certificate of attendance for this webinar via email after a week. Okay. Access to the recording of this session, key takeaways, and succeeding webinar schedules will be announced in our Facebook pages at Trend Micro Careers Philippines and Click Right PH. That's at Trend Micro Careers Philippines and Click Right PH. You can also send us a message if you want to request a topic you would want us to cover in our next webinar. So please like and follow our pages. Before we open, let me just remind you that of our house rules and secure learning webinar series code of conduct. The goal of secure learning is very much aligned with the Trend Micro vision to make the world safe for exchanging digital information. Through our secure learning webinar series, we aim to make it safe not only through technology, but also providing a venue for a community that is open to all, regardless of gender, sexual orientation, disability, ethnicity, or religion. It is our goal to provide a positive virtual experience for all participants. We implore everyone to read through our code of conduct to understand what is expected of secure learning webinar participants. Possible consequences for untoward behavior are in Secure Learning's committee's sole discretion, and the decision or decisions of the committee will be final. Consequences, breaches of this code of conduct may result in disqualification from participating in future live and virtual events and from engagement across Trend Micro blogs, online forums, and social media channels. Okay, so it's time for you guys to meet our speaker. Paul Miguel Babon is a BS Math graduate in St. Louis University from Baguio City. He joined Trend Micro just a few months after graduating as web detection service engineer. In his first year in Trend Micro, he was able to publish a blog entry titled The Tricky Forms of Phishing. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to present to you our speaker for this afternoon, Paul Babon. Paul, I'm going to stop my share so you can start sharing your screen.
Can anyone see the screen?
We can see it, Paul.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Bob, for that wonderful introduction. So, everyone, again, my name is Paul Miguel Babon, and I'll be your speaker for today's afternoon. And just to show everyone that we're coming in live, I will briefly turn on my camera. So, hi, everyone. But in order to save bandwidth, I will just turn this camera off for the rest of the webinar. So, introduction to web security threats. You've already known about me. I'm a BS Math graduate in St. Louis University, web detection service engineer in Trend Micro, Philippines. But one thing to take note is that these things are what we call information. And these information defines who I am, what I am, where I am, and why I am, which makes information valuable. It also makes information sensitive, and it makes also information fragile. So the question is, how valuable is information? I think I can believe that the answer can just be taken by taking my two pieces of information, my name and my school. Let's grab these two and type them in the Google search bar. And as you can see, just from the first two results, Google is already giving me links and websites that will help me more in knowing more about this person. You can see that I've been on LinkedIn, I've created a profile on researchgate.net, and maybe if you're going to delve even further, you might even find my own Facebook profile, YouTube channel, or Twitter handle, which is pretty ironic and convenient at the same time, because despite the internet being vast and ever changing, you only need two sets of words to actually identify me. But with everything that I've said, information is still just a fact. It is like a piece of knowledge gathered by your everyday gadgets like our smartphones and our computers. And of course, yes, it can be beneficial in creating credible resumes, profiling, and social media searching. But obviously, there's still some information that I could not get out publicly. Of course, I couldn't mention more sensitive information like passwords, government ID numbers, bank account numbers, social security numbers, and PIN numbers. We already know, of course, how sensitive these information are. But knowing isn't enough. Being aware is more important. And being aware of the dangers that are lurking inside the internet is more important than just merely knowing it. So, let's theorize. Imagine, what would happen if hackers got all my information? What would be the first thing they'd do? I think for my own case, they'd be gaining access to my own account. Of course, in gaining access to an account, there would be unwanted logins. I might even receive multiple spam messages. They might even get a chance of getting myself being impersonated, or even worse, having a possibility of getting infected by a malware. These are the dangers that we face every day to keep our information safe and secure. And these are the dangers that lurk behind every dark corner of the internet. Ladies and gentlemen, these are the dangers of what we call web security threats. Web security threats, or just web threats in general, is any threat that facilitates cybercrime or malicious activity, like downloading and spreading malware or stealing personal information and resources. Now, just to clarify, before we move on, keep in mind that there are a lot of web threats out there. But for just for this webinar, we are only going to focus on the most common, or at least the most prevailing threats that can pose a danger to the average person browsing the web, like when you're browsing on Facebook, on Amazon, YouTube, Twitter, and all kind of stuff. Because sometimes an average user may browse through Facebook and might find one of these. And an average user might also receive a text message or go to an online shopping site and might receive one of these. Ayun, pati PLDT, ginagawa na ding malicious. So yun, these are the examples that you are seeing right now of what we call a web threat. And this web threat is what we call a scam. So a scam can refer to anything fake, like fake news, fake promotions, and fake rewards. And they get your email addresses and, of course, money through a way of what we call social engineering. Now, social engineering can be defined in a way of exploiting human psychology. It's like manipulation. It is a scheme or a lie so that people can falsely trust you. And they do this sometimes by giving out a fake product. This is an example of a scam site. Congratulations! You are selected by PO Box 391 reward program. You have one iPhone 12 Pro pending now. Now, you think by this kind of content, I'm supposed to receive an iPhone 12. So all well and good, right? But no, because of course this is a scam site. And I can determine this is scam site because scams give rewards or quote unquote rewards from a contest that you have not participated in. I don't think I've ever remembered in joining a contest such as PO Box 391 Rewards Program. And truthfully, I don't think I'm even lucky to receive such rewards. So yeah, it's already enough to be suspicious. Another thing is that scams contain time limits. And the reason why scammers use this technique is because they want to give us an incentive or a sense of urgency to answer the survey. They want us to give in to the scam, buy the product, or it will go away in a lot of minutes, blah, blah, blah. But in reality, just refreshing the page will just reset these time limits. Another indicator is that scams contain incorrect grammar. We can see this example. Win an iPhone 11 Pro. Enter today to be in with a chance. Enter today to be in with a chance. Why? I mean, yeah, so that's one indicator of a scam. And another thing is that scams usually have bad website designs. If you look at the top left corner, you might even realize that what they're using is an old Apple logo from 2007, when their most recent version is the one from 2017. Now, if you didn't notice that, you can also look at the right side of this site. Now, if you look closely, you can see some black backgrounds on the iPhone images, like it wasn't cropped perfectly, which makes you question, right? Why would a reputable company such as Apple make incorrect grammar in the giveaway page? Why would they use an old logo from 2007 rather than the recent one? And most importantly, why? I mean, why would an Apple employee just smack a picture of an iPhone without having any professional edits like cropping the black background? So these are indicators of a scam site. Another thing is that scams may also be adult in nature. They are not friendly to children, thus attracting more of the adults. And sometimes the content displays mature websites, and sometimes clicking an adult scam link would redirect you to a different content overall. And then for scam URLs, they indicate a reward outright. Scammers want you to know that you've stumbled upon is actually a free giveaway website. You can see in the first two examples over there, priceforyou.co and free gift cards and giveaways.xyz. These are what we call domain names, or at least the name of the website itself. And you can actually see just by their domain name, they're already indicating that they want you to give a prize. They want you to give free gift cards and giveaways and such. And another thing is that scam URLs uses uncommon TLDs. Now, TLDs are what we call top level domains, and they are important for identifying what the website is. Like .gov can be a government website, .org for organizations, and .edu for schools and universities. But for scam URLs, they don't actually use those TLDs. Instead, they use unpopular ones like .online and .xyz. And they are already uncommon for us users. We don't actually browse a lot of websites that contain .online or .xyz. And since they are not so popular, scammers can buy websites even cheaper and save a lot of money. So another one is that scam URLs uses random or gibberish words. Now I say this because some scammers don't care what the name of the website is. All they want is just to scam you. That's it. So they just want to mix some random words or smash the keyboard and voila, you have yourself a gibberish website name. And you can also see in the second example, bearhowever.com is just also a random made domain name or website name. So given all of these things that we've learned about a scam, I want to ask you a question. What is the main goal of any scam site? To make an original product more popular, create awareness, or to gain profit? So Bob, can you please bring out the poll for this first question?
Sure, Paul. Here we go.
You have 25 seconds to answer this. But while you're answering, Bob, what do you think is the answer for this question?
For me, is to gain more profit.
That is an interesting answer. Let's just wait for 25 seconds and let's see what the results are. Okay, the results are in. So as you can see, a lot of you have answered to gain profit, which is congratulations. That is actually a very great answer. All the scams do is actually just to gain profit. That's all the things that a scam can do. Because one of the goals of a scam site is to actually gain profit when you buy their non-existent products and services. When you're giving into the scam, you are giving them money, but you get nothing in return. Also, another thing of how scam sites gain profit is through their surveys. And through their surveys, we can actually see that our own personal information, when we answer those surveys, are grabbed by those scammers. And they use those information to sell it to third party companies. I think you may not know this, but some companies thrive off of your information. They want to know the things that you like, what location you're in, so that they may know what product they can effectively sell you. But scammers may also use your information for their own personal use, like sending even more scam sites. Or, for another special example, stumbling into a scam site and then you are also having like say a bunch of emails in your own email account. And then if you go into the scam site and give into that scam site, you might receive a malicious email. And that malicious email would contain like say your account has expired, your password is going to expire. And then you go open the website and then it says that you need to type your own email address and password. So you type those email address and password and then you click submit. All well and good, right? Congratulations. Your account has just been compromised. And this is what we call another web threat of what we call a phishing. A phishing can refer to anything fake of login forms, of account expirations, and fake documents. They also use social engineering, but unlike a scam where they want your email addresses and money, phishing wants your passwords, credit card numbers, bank account numbers, and other sensitive information. Now, the one main common similarity of all the phishing sites is that they will always try to replicate legitimate login pages. But some are badly designed. You can see that the legitimate site is complete with an icon, a typeface, a forgot username or password, and an option to sign up here. But for the phishing site, it's very lousily copied. It's like there's no added buttons in case you forgot your password or in case you want to sign up. But there's only a password text box and an email text box and just the logo of the Bank of Singapore, which they don't even have a logo. So these are the indicator of a phishing site. And another one is that some phishing sites use third-party services to create fake login pages. I think if you've had enough experiences in the internet, you might stumble upon advertisements like create a free website now with Wix, create a free website with Bibly. And sometimes, whenever you register for an online event or participate in an academic research survey, chances are you might stumble upon Google Forms or Microsoft Forms. And unfortunately, even fish authors are able to take advantage of these services as well. So whenever you are suspicious of a login page, always scroll down. Always scroll down at the bottom of the page and make sure that login forms like Microsoft and Facebook are not hosted under these website builders. So now that we know what a phishing site looks like, I want to ask you another question. Are these phishing sites? Is it yes, no, or not sure? So Bob, can you please bring in the second poll for this question?
Sure, Paul. Here we go.
You have another 25 seconds to answer this. But while you are answering, Bob, what do you think is the answer for this question?
Honestly, I can't tell. They look so legit, so it's very
Yeah,
hard to tell. Yeah.
so you're not sure, right?
No, I'm not. I'm not.
Okay, interesting. Let's wait for 5 more seconds and see the results.
Okay, here are the results.
Okay, so a lot of you answered no, which is it can be a yes or no, but in actual truth, there's non insufficient information to prove this as a phishing site. So the answer here is not sure. Yeah, exactly. This question is actually the first time that I've witnessed where not sure is being the right answer. Because sometimes phishing sites are strikingly similar. You can actually see the phishing site over here and the legitimate site on the left side. You can see that there's not so much of a difference. So how would you actually know if you stumble upon a phishing site or a legitimate site? Well, you need to always inspect the URL. And the URL here is, you can see from the legitimate site, it's more simple. Instagram.com, Facebook.com, PayPal.com/pay/sign in. But for phishing sites, they're a little bit longer. It's like they're trying their best to replicate normal URLs. And this is because phishing sites or phishing URLs will always attempt to copy your brand name, or at least most of the time to copy your brand name. Like Office 365 Activity is copying office.com. PayPal Help Center.tk is copying paypal.com. Skype-online is copying skype.com. And another thing is that they share the same aspects as a scam URL using uncommon TLDs like .top, .info, and .xyz. Remember that they will always try to replicate the brand name whenever they can. So now that we've learned everything, the basics of what a phishing site is, let's move on to the next question. Why do phishing sites want to get your passwords and other credentials? Is it to create a backup of your credentials, gain unauthorized access, or just to check if your passwords are secure enough? So, Bob, can you please bring up the third question?
There you go.
So, what do you think, Bob, is the answer for this kind of question?
To gain access to your account.
Ah, okay. Very interesting. Let's just wait for 25 seconds. So there, those are the results. Congrats, everyone. A lot of you have actually answered B, to gain unauthorized access of the account. Phishing sites do not serve as a tool for security like backups or securing passwords. It is just plainly to steal your own credentials and access them afterwards. So with the goal of a phishing site, phishing authors will gain unauthorized access to your own accounts. But before we can delve even further with this, I want to describe a list of things that we can do within our own account. So here's a table of the things we can do. With social media, we can chat with friends, upload photos or images, emails, create and send emails, file transfer services, you can upload, transfer, and share files. Online banks, you can withdraw and deposit money. And online shopping, buying products online, order food, and pay bills. But if phishing authors gain access to your account, look what would happen. For social media, you might get impersonation. They might deliver malware to your own friends. They might even delete your own profile, email address, leaking sensitive personal or company information, and also sending phishing emails as well to your employees. File transfer services like OneDrive and Google Drive can have a corruption of deleting files, uploading malwares, extortion. Online banks, empty account balance, credit or debit card fraud, and online shopping, buying products that you have not even paid for. So you can see why now you can see why it is actually dangerous to share these kinds of information to the public, because all it needs is one account, one email address, and one password. If you are using this kind of method in signing up, like sign in with Google, sign in with Facebook, sign in with Twitter, then the fish author already has the ability to access multiple services within only one account, which makes phishing sites even more dangerous in this densely connected world. But unfortunately, that's not even the worst. We still have not encountered the most dangerous of all, which is malvertisements. Malvertisements, or just simply malware advertisements, also use social engineering, but their goal is to actually wanting you to become exposed with a lot of malware. Some malvertisements falsely advises you that your programs are out of date. However, they do not even have enough evidence to back up their claim. Usually, when websites wants to scan your programs to check if they're up to date, they will usually ask for permission first because they want to have access to your files and softwares. But for this example, they don't malvertisements don't do that actually. They just say it outright without having any kind of evidence. And these are just fake advisories. Another thing is that some advertisements wants you to allow website notifications without sufficient reasons or for the most ridiculous reasons. Remember, like when you're usually enabling website notifications, you're only going to use this like for let's say having a new message from a friend, receiving a new email, or having receiving new um, subscriptions. But for malvertisements, they want you to allow notifications like uh, being a human being, to continue watching, or to close a website. No, there may be chances that you have stumbled upon a malvertisement if you've ever come across one of these. Another thing is that malvertisements may come from illegal streaming or adult websites. If you've ever come across these sites, chances are that that when you click play on the play button, you might your web browser might open a new tab and might simply display an advertisement, right? But some of those may be a scam, and most worst of all, some of those may be a malvertisement. But the most dangerous indicator of all is that, of course, malvertisements can download malicious software, or what we call malware. You can see that malvertisements wants you to download spoof programs like Facebook Messenger or install suspicious Chrome plugins that can look very templated and copy pasted. But okay, at least with this indicator, right, we can still have the option of avoiding to download this malicious software. Because whenever our web browser downloads a program, we can actually see it at the bottom of the screen, right? And we can just automatically cancel it. We still have the option to cancel the process just by clicking cancel at the bottom of the web browser. However, there is a malicious technique known as the drive-by download. And the drive-by download can download malware silently in the background without even the user knowing it. And this is done by exploiting security flaws in web components like Java and Flash. What's even worse is that the same technique can also be used to execute the malware in the background as well. So it's downloading and executing. You wouldn't know if you're already infected with malware until it's too late. You can see at the right side here is an article of how by the Digital Guardian of how malvertisements download and execute malware through the use of the Flash plugin. So just imagine how dangerous it is to actually fall into this kind of threat. Malvertisements have been used to compromise popular websites before. They were able to create malicious advertisements in Yahoo, Forbes, Spotify, and this was just reported in the last 4 or 5 years. Which is why it is always best that you should always be careful of what you click. So those are the basics of what we call a malvertisement. So let's move to our next question. What makes malvertisements different from scam and phishing sites? Social engineering, emails, or malicious activity? Now, can we bring up the polls? There we go. Bob, what do you think is the answer for this question?
It's for me, it's to enact malicious activity.
Okay, let's actually wait for the results and let's see if your answer is correct. Okay, here are the results. So a lot of you got it correct. Malvertisements can be different from other websites because it can enact any malicious activity. Malvertisements can still rely on social engineering to trick the user, and malvertisements rely on displaying advertisements rather than primarily coming from emails. So the most different here from the other websites is that they can enact any malicious activity. So if you allow notifications, if you allow notifications, you'll be bombarded with a lot of fake advertisement notifications, or some of it unwanted. And maybe some of it may even be malicious. making it be a malvertisement, making you vulnerable to malware attacks. And if you give in to this malvertisement, if you allow this notification and you're baiting to a malvertisement, you may have a chance of getting installed with a malware. So once the malware has been exposed or installed, you'll be exposed to these kinds of attacks: propagation, destruction, unexpected behavior, remote control, information theft, exploitation, deception, hidden stealth mechanism, and extortion. All of these are the malicious behaviors that a malware can do, not only in your web browser, but also in your entire computer system. Of course, this is not my topic to say, but if you're interested to learn more about malwares and their behaviors, you can refer to our previous webinar, The Introduction to Malware Threats by Rafael Centeno. So here's a summary of what we discussed for our web threats. At least with scam, right? At least with scam, their goal is to actually just steal your money and emails. And with phishing, they can gain access to your own accounts and use it for their own malicious purpose. But with malvertisements, anything goes. Once a malvertisement download and executes a malware, a lot of worse things can happen, like infection, ransom, destruction, and any other malware behavior. So given these kinds of web threats, our internet browsing should just be like traveling. We always need to be cautious about where we're going and always prepare ourselves for the worst. And of course, despite these web threats becoming prevalent for the average user, there are still ways to prevent it. So prevention number one, expand in what you know. Think before you click. Now, this is already an age-old advice that's been told to a lot of us throughout the years, and also happens to work effectively all the time. Always know who the sender was. Always know who actually sent this suspicious URL. Always make sure that the sender is an actual and verified brand. Do a bit of light research, at least just some kind of research, or at least a Google search on who the seller is, who the brand is, if the reviews are actually good, if it's actually reputable or legitimate. And if you think you're unsure if the email or website you have received actually has phishing content, like saying your account expired, like saying you need to reset your password, like this and like that, you just need to go to the official website. Like if a phishing email says that your Microsoft account has been expired, just go to the Microsoft account website, the official website, and just check it from there if it's actually true. And the next is to become familiar with the websites you visit. And I think this is one of the most common factors as to why people are still getting baited into phishing links, is because they do not recognize what the design of a website is. They are not familiar enough with the website interface and design. Because of course, it is not a priority when browsing these websites. We only go to Facebook to post and chat for our friends. We only go to Twitter for just to tweet about things. We don't actually focus more on the design aspects of the website itself. So it is actually important that you should be familiar with these kinds of designs, because later on, it would be easier to spot later what is legitimate and what is fake. Always inspect also the URLs. Make sure that the URLs are actually legitimate, like www.facebook.com, https www.twitter.com. As long as it's verified, you can also check those in. You may actually be safe. And also, be familiar with these kinds of logos. Always be familiar, because there are a lot of people, or at least from my experience, who are already not actually up to date with the current logos from this year. So just an advice, Facebook and Messenger are not already the blocky logos that we've used to before. They are already lighter and brighter colors. They're more rounded. And for Office 365, please note that Office 365, the software bundled with Word and PowerPoint, is now rebranding itself to Microsoft 365. So if you come across a website that is still advertising Office 365, it may be suspicious. Maybe, okay? Maybe. I say maybe because we don't assume that it's automatically malicious. Microsoft is still in the transition of changing the brand. So expect that Microsoft 365 would still be a staple brand by the next few years or so, and not now. Another thing is that I think just recently, Google has already rolled out a new set of icons for their own Google Workplace. So Gmail, Google Drive, and Calendar are already changing their icons to make it more unified. Personally, I prefer the old logos because they're more unique to the service, but it is still required that you still need to be up to date with the designs so that you may know easily what is fake and what is real. Another thing, stay up to date with new and emerging web threats. Now, I'm not asking you to delve into a rabbit hole and research this kind of stuff, of course. I just want to suggest that if you've ever stumbled upon news relating to cybersecurity or web threats in general, it could actually be helpful if you're to make yourself aware if you're actually reading this kind of stuff. Just last month, I've been receiving emails about phishing URLs and emails posing as UP officials. And with the coming holidays this December, we might actually be exposed with a lot of scam sites relating to holiday bonuses. Ay, akala mo nagkaroon ng 13th month or mga Christmas bonus pero yun pala naging scam pala, no? So you need to be up to date with these kinds of relevant news. Prevention number 2: stay secured with that you have. Be selective of what information you share. Keep in mind that your name, school, and jobs are okay to be shared by everyone, of course, like what I did. However, information like your address should only be shared for like delivery purposes, government or job applications, or at least when friends want to sleep over at your house. It is not optimal to share your location in the public environment. And of course, your bank account numbers should always be for yourself and of the bank whenever they request you to. And your passwords, of course, should always be exclusive for you immediately. And regarding passwords, also need to improve those kinds of passwords. Never use your personal information. Don't make it short, and don't make it at least sequential and obvious, like you're just smashing the keyboard altogether. You need to use random words, symbols, and numbers. Make it longer, at least 10 to 12 characters at minimum, and make it unique for every website. These are my own personal recommendations when it comes to having a strengthened password. Another thing is that you need to enhance your password security by regularly changing passwords every 3 to 4 months. Now, this is also my own personal recommendation, changing every 3 to 4 months, as long as you can do it at least maybe twice within the year. But this can be a problem, right? I just already advised you that you need to make every password unique for every website. And yet, I'm already asking you to even change it every 3 to 4 months a year. So this poses a problem because how am I supposed to keep up with remembering all these passwords if they're always currently up to date and always so unique? So you always need to use a password manager. And what password managers do is that they store all of your information or your passwords into one single database, so that you do not necessarily need to memorize all of them, because sometimes you might even forget one of them. But passwords aren't even enough. So you must also enable two-factor authentication. And two-factor authentication is simply just logging in with two pieces of evidence. So with the basic login, right, you only need your password. That is what we call a single-factor authentication. But with two-factor authentication, it is not enough to just type your own password. For these kinds of cases, you might need to use your phone to approve the login altogether. And this may be in the form of sending a code number to a text message or a notification within the app itself. You should always enable this feature on every website as possible, since this is already becoming the norm for popular websites like Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And it also helps because passwords may not be enough to secure your own privacy. Enhance file and software security. Always try to update because sometimes malvertisements rely on security flaws. And they might even exploit a lot of flaws within your web browser. So it is always recommended that you always update your web browser so that they may patch these security flaws. Disable Flash, pop-ups, and redirects. Now, some might question why we need to disable Flash when it's actually a helpful plugin. But the truth is, the Flash plugin is already a very rather old plugin. A lot of services and websites do not rely Flash anymore. Even Google and Adobe itself has announced that they wouldn't support Flash anymore by the end of this year, 2020. And one of its reasons is because of its security flaws and its potential to have malvertisements. So always disable this. Also, install an adblock plugin. You need to install an adblock so you can disable advertisements and prevent malvertisements. If you have already this enabled, and chances are you might come to a website and they might notify you that you cannot continue unless you turn this off, unless you turn this ad blocker off, because some businesses rely on advertisements to gain profit. Now, it is not advisable to disable the ad blocker. You only need to disable it whenever it is necessary. At least this is consider it as a last option to disable the ad blocker. Advertisements are great. It's just that some sites go for intrusive ads and pop-up options, and some may lead to malvertisements. And of course, the most obvious thing is to install an antivirus program. This not only to prevent the current web threats that I've indicated, but also for malware and email threats in general. So not only is your web browser more protected, but also your whole system. And the last prevention, help with what you can do. If you notice a suspicious web threat like a scam, phishing, or malvertisement, always report the abuse service whenever possible. You can actually see when it's being used by a third-party service, there's always a report button like report abuse, and checking if the ad is inappropriate. You can actually see that forms already indicate that you should never give out your password when it comes to phishing. So always report it whenever you see some things like this, because it also helps us. It also helps services and cybersecurity companies to gain more insight in these kinds of web threats. And of course, it also helps in preventing other people getting exposed with these kinds of threats as well. The next, act immediately. If you think you've given to the scam, the malvertisement, or the phishing, and if you think you were a victim of the web threat, always change your password immediately, as soon as possible. Change it immediately, because I believe the first thing that hackers will do when they gain your password is actually to gain access to your account. So you must always change your password immediately. And the next thing you need to do is to report the issue to the website support page and follow the necessary steps indicated by them. And then if you want to be more secure, you always need to rescan. Let your antivirus rescan the system for any additional problems, because you may not even know you've been already infected by a drive-by download or drive-by execution of a malware. And in case if it is already too late to change your password, I've posted link or a list of websites where you can actually click on in case you lost your account or recovered your account. And the last thing, the very, very last thing, and I think this is actually most important for me, is to educate others. Being aware and secure for your own personal information is not enough if the rest of the community is not practicing the same techniques. It is our individual responsibility to spread the awareness, spread the knowledge of the possible threats that may invade this online landscape. If one person becomes a victim of a web threat, what are the chances that a second one may fall into the same hole? What are the chances that our friends, our family, our school, our loved ones might fall victim to these kinds of web threats? Our information is our own, yes. But despite all these advices I've given to you to prevent these kind of threats, you are still our last line of defense. So I want you to spread the awareness, share these crucial pieces of information so that they may be protected, as well as you to be protected as well in this today's online landscape. And so before I end my webinar, I just want to remind everyone that the only information that should be shared freely is the information that is shared securely. And who do you think said that? Well, of course, it's me, Paul Miguel Babon. And that will be the end for my presentation. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, Paul, thank you so much for your presentation. I'm now going to share my screen and we will now move on to our Q&A portion. Okay, so it's time for our Q&A. Now take note everybody, our subject matter experts will join our speaker in answering the questions from our audience and have been already answering some of your questions. Please be reminded that we will only answer inquiries within the scope of our expertise. Okay, so let's start with the first question that has the most upvotes. So the first question with the most upvotes is from Celine Dormiendo. Is there a possibility that scam websites use HTTPS protocol?
Yes, actually, yes. And sometimes it is not even guaranteed that the website is already secure. I mean, some domain or web hosting services provide HTTPS as a package for creating websites. So sometimes they actually use this to think that the website is secure, but there's still a possibility that it is not. So it is not already a great indicator that if you think that an HTTPS protocol is already safe, no, it is actually not. There's still a lot of capabilities within the code of the HTML that can still steal your information, like money and passwords and such. So there. I hope I've answered your question.
Thank you, Paul. Next question is from Christian Klein Ramos. Are IP addresses really that sensitive? Almost all services record your IP address. Some, like forums or even Wikipedia, displays your public IP address for all to view. Is that sensitive? Is it that sensitive, knowing that it only shows inaccurate location?
In terms of IP addresses, it can actually sometimes be beneficial, like for ourselves. Like whenever we see a hacker going compromising our websites, we can actually identify their IP addresses to and actually track them. And yes, sometimes it is actually very questionable when you think about it, like your own unique IP addresses being tracked by a lot of these services. Uh, but for it is actually it is actually very normalized to the point wherein the things that when it comes to IP addresses, we don't actually feel very much. What do you mean? Like saying that we need to be so secured about these IP addresses. Like it is already normalized that it is already common that the internet and how the internet works is already like through tracking your IP address and such. But if you still feel unsure about your if you think your IP addresses are getting grabbed or getting stolen or maybe stolen by legitimate websites, even though it's actually normal, you can actually use some VPN services instead. So I hope I have answered your question.
Okay, thank you, Paul. The next question, with a lot of upvotes, actually, is from Charles Tomeldan. But I'm not familiar with this icon. It doesn't come out on my end, but he asks, I'll just describe it for you, Paul. Does a square or rectangular icon on the address bar ensure absolute safety or security? I don't know if
Ah,
it's a.
um,
Would you know this?
in my screen, I can actually see that the icon is a padlock icon.
There
It's a
you go.
padlock
Okay,
icon.
because in my on my end, it's not a padlock. Okay.
Yeah. So this the same with what we call the HTTPS. So it is actually great to that web browsers are actually implementing these icons because whenever you see that padlock icon on your web browser, it's indicating that it is an HTTPS. Now, as said before, some of it may be secure. Some sites are mean that it is already secure, but some sites doesn't mean that because they have an HTTPS doesn't mean that they're automatically secured because scam sites when they buy domains, when they buy a lot of domains, phishing authors, scammers, hackers, when they buy domains, sometimes web hosting give out packages like HTTPS. So it's not really guaranteed that this is actually secure. So I hope I've answered your question.
Thank you, Paul. I'd just like to remind everyone that we will only answer questions that are related to Paul's webinar that he presented. And we also have people joining us from Facebook. You can also send in your questions that can be answered in this portion. The next question is from Mark Jason Java. Are notifications that the website use cookie safe? How do we answer these prompts slash windows? Is it okay to ignore or cancel instead of clicking yes?
Yes. Uh, it sometimes it really depends on the website that you're on. But in the context of like say scam sites or malvertisements, it is actually automatically mandatory that you need to deny these kinds of notifications because you've only visited the site just recently and they're already asking you to give us these website notifications and such. I think it is beneficial for like for Facebook or even Google or Gmail and such. In case if you want, if let's say if you're busy and you want to see some notifications, if you want to receive a new email and such, it's actually great to enable these website notifications for those legitimate services. But if it's for like other services like scams or malvertisements, no, automatically no, you should you should always deny these kinds of things. So I hope I've answered the question.
Thank you, Paul. We have 10 minutes on the clock and we still have a lot of questions, and we still have time to address most of them. The next question is from Raymond Salyoan. Are there ways to identify if a link or URL I'm about to click is a download link which might potentially contain a virus or phishing malware? And he also has a follow up question like, can ads contain malware that will automatically download if I click on them?
Yes. Yeah, that's actually very dangerous, right? When you're clicking on an ad and it actually automatic downloads, yes, it's actually possible that they may malvertisements may actually use those kind of things. And in with regards to actually determining if the download program is actually legit or not, you can actually try using other options, like say if the website is legitimate, like saying let's say OneDrive, like downloading files. Of course, that is already an indication that you're already downloading a file. But how would you know if the file you're downloading is actually malware, right? Fortunately, services like these, like that I mentioned, like OneDrive and Google Drive, they will also try to check if they have viruses. They will also they want to help you as well in determining if this is a malware or not. So whenever you actually download this, you might actually see a notice from the service checking for viruses, checking if this malicious program and such. So that is actually helpful in determining if this is a malicious software or not. and and also, if you want to know, if you want to make sure if this is not a malware or malicious, always need to check if the person who sent it is from or the service is actually legit. Always check for reviews, always check for the comments to this kind of program, because they may give you insight if this is actually a malware or not. So I hope I've answered your question.
Thank you, Paul. Everyone, we're now going to move on to Facebook, and we have questions coming from Facebook. The first question is from Patrick Jones Mislang. What is more effective and easy to remember, a password or passphrase?
Password or passphrase? Ooh, I think passphrase can actually be maybe somewhat less secure. I think a password is even more unique than a passphrase, because like I think from what I believe, when it comes to passphrase, is because is when the service asks you for a personal question and then you try to answer it. Of course, you're going to say, "What is the name of my dog? What is the name of my cat?" and such. It is actually less secure to actually do those things, because it is something that you know, but it is something that someone else might know. Like if you if you if someone else knows what the name of the dog is, then chances are they might actually type the correct answer as well. So it is actually best that to actually use passwords instead, because they are more unique and more harder for hackers to figure out. So I hope I've answered the question.
Thank you, Paul. Next question, still from Facebook, is from Art Dizon. How safe is the login via fingerprint or face scan on our mobile phone apps?
Okay. um I don't have enough research for this, but from my case, from my observation, sorry, it really depends on the phone model that you're having, because a lot of things, a lot of the phones are more secure nowadays, like the popular ones like Samsung and Apple. They're already more reputable in terms of security. But sometimes low reputation brand phones can actually have maybe actually be compromised for security of fingerprint. You may not actually you may not actually know how their security is, because they're actually different for each and every hardware, for each of every hardware of the phone. So it really depends, but you should actually just use that. I would prefer it if you actually use it as an additional factor for logging in. So like you're going to include your password, of course, for a login, but you also need to add a fingerprint just in case. It may not. I wouldn't know if there are any unsecure phones out there with fingerprint detection, but just for security purposes, you also need to enable that as an additional for authentication. So I hope I've answered your question.
Thank you, Paul. Still from Facebook, from Jefferson Ombria. Is it possible for the hacker to access your account by just clicking the link sent to your email?
Just by clicking on the link sent to your email. Ooh, okay. Um, it's possible, right? It's possible because as we've discussed, malvertisements have an ability called a drive-by download. And in the drive-by download, they will automatically and install a malware. And a malware can be in the background without you even knowing it. And it's possible that those kinds of malware may actually be like keylogging and actually have phishing capabilities in stealing your own information. I've also witnessed some malware trying to record your screen, trying to record your own keystrokes, and that is the tactic of a malware in stealing your information. So it is actually possible to have clicking the links and just gaining your own information automatically. So I hope I've answered the question.
Thank you, Paul. We're now going back to our Q&A area, and then I'll just go back to Facebook if we have time. Next question is from Marvin Yalung. Uh, can VPN prevent phishing, scam, malware, even if you click the suspicious URL?
Phishing malware. Okay. So my own knowledge from VPNs is that they are actually just trying to mask your IP addresses so that internet services cannot track you or cannot track your own location. This is why whenever you enable VPN, you're free from restricted sites, from the ones that are not banned in this location, the Philippines. That is on that is one benefit from installing a VPN. But getting exposed with phishing, getting exposed with scams and malvertisements, it is still not enough, or I might say it does not even make a difference, because stealing information relies on you actually typing your own password, typing your own email addresses on the website itself. So despite your IPs being masked, whatever you're still sending out in your information, if you ever type on a malicious website, they will still gain access to your own information and leaving you still vulnerable to malware attacks. So VPNs are not enough, or at least may not even have be a difference in terms of security. So I hope I've answered your question there.
Thank you, Paul. 3 minutes on the clock. Let's go to more questions. The next question is from, we're going back to Facebook in a bit. Let me just go through our Q&A portion here, chat window. How does a scammer copy the name of a site which looks exactly like the link of a website, specifically banks? This is from Kate Valenton.
Yeah. It is actually relatively easy for any kind of person to create a name of a website. I mean, I can just try to create my own right now, like paulbab.com, and I can find my results as long as it is not taken. So it is actually possible for a scammer to copy the name of the website just by simply typing it. They're only just going to type, let's say they want to buy a domain name or website name, and they just want to, and the service will indicate what is the name of the website would you like to buy. So they just need to type the website name, and they see if it's actually possible to buy it. And if they buy it, then of course they've already gained the scamming site. They can create a lot of words like ama-zone.com, f.a.book.com, and so lot of things like those. There's actually a lot of unlimited ways to actually create a website, and it's actually very simple. And sometimes it may be convenient, but sometimes it's also dangerous. So you need to keep not be knowledgeable about these kinds of things. However, there's some where like Google is actually preventing ways to actually gain scammers to buy these kinds of fake websites. Google is already buying a lot of fake domain names, like I think maybe goo.gl.e. So whenever you type that in the URL or the web address, you are redirected to the normal Google. So that's actually a good way for services like Google to actually prevent these kinds of scam sites. So I hope I've answered your question.
Thank you, Paul. We've got 1 minute on the clock. We can address just two more questions. I'm going to get one from Facebook and one from our Q&A area. So from Facebook, coming from Gerald Diego, how do we know if an antivirus or disk cleanup software is not spyware?
Okay. The same method you should use, like whenever you're trying to click on a URL. Just like you need to always look for the context. Always check for reviews. Always check for user feedbacks, like to say if this is spyware or not. You need to use that. You need to use all those factors up to make your own judgment to think that if this is spyware or not. And sometimes you may even look at say its legitimacy, its URL verification, like when browsing through YouTube, you can see like their reviews of the product, if it's actually legit. Is it actually effective for this antivirus program? Is it actually not a spyware or not? So you always need to rely on those things, those external factors, or primarily those reviews in general, to determine if this actually a reputable software or not. So I hope I've answered your question.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. Here is our last question from Von Miones. Can extensions like JPEG, MP4, MKV, etc., be infected with malware?
Ooh, yes, of course. This not my topic to cover, but yes, definitely yes. There are a lot of there are a lot of kinds of malware like viruses, or maybe even worms, to try to propagate and copy the name of the extension and just actually be a virus in itself. And sometimes they might actually encrypt it like a ransomware and such. Or even more interesting, they can actually use PNGs and JPEGs and use it as a virus itself. Like when you're already, they can implement malicious code within those images and actually use it for malicious purposes. It's actually very dangerous. So I hope I've answered your question.
Thank you very much, Paul. And thank you so much for everyone for joining us today, and our subject matter experts for helping us with our Q&A. I'd like to remind everyone that our next webinar topic will be Introduction to Ransomware, which will be on January 21st, 2021. And the link to registration will be announced via Trend Microcareers Philippines Facebook page. So please follow this page. The key takeaways for this session and access to the recording will also be posted there. Please like and follow these pages to stay updated. For survey and feedback, kindly take a snapshot of this QR code and answer the survey after leaving the session so you can get your certificate of attendance. Again, if you need to answer the survey to be able to get your certificate of attendance. We would also like to share with you that Trend Micro recently released our 2021 rather security predictions titled "Turning the Tide." For more information, you can check it out. The link is right below the picture on the screen. And on behalf of Trend Micro and our presenter Paul Babon, this is Bobby Claudio wishing you a wonderful day and have a Merry Christmas, and see you next year. Goodbye, everyone. Stay safe and good afternoon.